رمسنا هي فاغنر دقيقة شلنا التنات شلنا وية الناس اللي انت دينا تنغان كوس الدينات هليكوبتر تنا دخان هو ينهر سيفاري اكرادني فسننا ضارت روريا وننا قصاصا كطاولنا غصما دنانا بارودن هو صغير غد بقودي كبير احنا نغرمي فوق وبس راسني قيمة بالغين سنة بس انا سنقينا درغ الوقت متن تانبكا.
Across the arid lands of Mali, Russian Wagner mercenaries secretly kidnapped, tortured, and disappeared hundreds of civilians for over 3 years. They held them in remote camps, on military sites co-run with Mali's army, and even on former UN bases. That's what our new investigation about Russian secret prisons reveals, following our work in Russia and the occupied territories of Ukraine for the Viktoriia project. Ukrainian journalist Viktoriia Roshchyna, who was investigating the illegal detention of civilians in occupied Ukraine and Russia, was herself captured by Russia and declared dead in September 2024. Forbidden Stories and its partners France 24, Le Monde, and IStories pursued her work on ghost prisoners, but this time the investigation crossed new borders and led us all the way to Africa. We met with the rare Malian survivors of this system of detention and torture and identified 6 detention sites in Mali where Russian mercenaries held civilians captive between 2022 and 2024. Our investigation uncovers how Russian mercenaries have replicated this system of detaining and torturing civilians in Mali. 2 continents, 2 very different contexts, but the patterns are the same: kidnapping, arbitrary arrests, no contact with the outside world, and systematic torture, sometimes to the point of death. Since Mali's 2021 coup d'etat, and as French forces began withdrawing later that year, the Malian military junta has relied on Wagner mercenaries in the country to support operations against jihadist groups. Just a few months after their arrival, the Russians were spotted with the Malian army spreading terror among the local population. They looted and burnt villages, raped and massacred residents. In July 2024, footage from a body camera worn by a Wagner mercenary was recovered from the body of a Russian fighter killed during the Battle of Tinzawaten. The video shows Wagner forces and Malian soldiers interrogating a woman inside a tent, threatening her.
Хорошо, где у вас в поселке оружие находится?
Est-ce qu'il y a de l'arme ici, dans le village? Est-ce qu'il y a de l'arme?
Мы сейчас, скажи, ее заставим.
Alors, désolé toi. Comment ça fait désolé? Soit tu fais toute seule, soit on te fait faire ça. Vas-y. Au centre. Oui, tout ça. Enlève tout ça. Enlève ça.
They arbitrarily detained hundreds of civilians, tortured them to extract information, and sometimes demanded ransoms from their families. No further news of these detainees reaches the outside world. Few are believed to have survived. Since it's nearly impossible for journalists to travel to Mali to investigate, we went to the neighboring country of Mauritania to gather these exclusive testimonies from Wagner's victims. More specifically, we went to Mbera, a camp currently hosting around 120,000 refugees from Mali, with another 150,000 living in the surrounding areas. There, we met a former humanitarian worker who was kidnapped by Wagner in August 2024. He wished to remain anonymous.
Lorsqu'on nous a arrêtés, on nous a amenés à la base, ils ont rempli des récipients. Ils nous ont plongés dans l'eau et jusqu'à ce que nous perdons le souffle. Et on nous posait des questions, on nous frappait avec des trucs, des fils qui ont des courants. Il était énervé, il est parti, il a mis de la musique, c'est leur musique russe. Et chaque fois qu'on interrogeait les gens aussi, on mettait de la musique, leur musique pour empêcher les cris à résonner. Ça, c'est toute la nuit. Et aussi, il y avait des FAMa, c'est-à-dire l'armée malienne qui était avec eux, qui les soutenait aussi avec les tortures et autres choses, tout ce qu'ils font, qui les soutenait d'ailleurs, c'est ça.
Ismail was a tailor in Yafunke. He told us he had been detained for nearly 40 days in a container under the blazing sun.
أمرا هي ديت يا سيراني فس النسن يا حصال تنظر النسن يا سندين أدرج تاجي نصنت وراسا أبدين
الناس ورتيلة سيروا ناسي سند الشغلي دا إلا تسقرابي أنا قايش نقرابي وان بودرون لا سهرت سمينانا.
One of the detention sites we identified is a former MINUSMA base here in Kidal. After 10 years in the country, the UN Stabilization Mission withdrew in 2023, abandoning all of its bases. Some were taken over by Wagner and FAMa. In November 2023, mercenaries from the late Yevgeny Prigozhin's group raised their flag over the Kidal fort. By late 2024, they were still in Kidal. Satellite footage we obtained shows a heavily armored truck known as the Chechen stationed at the center of the camp, a vehicle specifically designed for and used by the Wagner Group. Nearly 1,500 kilometers away, Nauma was held by Wagner in Nampala. He recalls spending 4 days locked naked in a shower.
wallahi mi yi torrama ɓe laaɓi tati koɓe nanka ɓe pi'i ɓe cuumi ɓe gaɗi kala jawdam du fof boni ɓe pii kam e tiina ani ɓe cuumi kam e reedu.
At its peak in Mali, Wagner deployed over 2,400 mercenaries, rotating from Ukraine, Syria, and the Central African Republic, bringing with them weapons and brutal tactics forged across other battlefields.
Donc en faisant venir les Russes, les Maliens changent un petit peu leur manière de fonctionner sur le terrain. Ils voulaient se débarrasser un petit peu de tous ces yeux extérieurs qui portaient des jugements sur la manière dont fonctionnait l'armée malienne. Et les Russes permettaient ça, en fait. Ça a une implication directe sur la manière dont ils utilisent la force. Les civils sont délibérément ciblés après le déploiement de Wagner.
Wagner's name is synonymous with terror for journalists across Africa. No media outlet dares to speak out for fear of reprisals. In the Central African Republic, journalist Efrem Yalike had to flee the country in order to expose Russian disinformation campaigns, as revealed in our investigation, The Propaganda Machine. In Mali, Reporters Without Borders ranked the country 119th out of 180 in its annual Press Freedom Index. Contacted by our consortium, neither Wagner nor the Russian authorities nor the Malian armed forces responded to our questions. On June 6, 2025, Wagner announced its departure from Mali via telegram with these words, "Mission accomplished." But this doesn't mark the end of Russia's presence, which now continues under the Africa Corps, a group directly controlled by the Russian Ministry of Defense.